The room went silent when the billionaire's daughter laughed and said, "Security, remove her. She doesn't belong here." The woman didn't argue. She didn't flinch. She simply turned, and that's when everything the family owned began to tremble. If you're ready to hear the whole story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Because tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as crazy as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let's get into it. The Gala filled the downtown Chicago hotel like a living thing. Crystal lights humming overhead, polished shoes gliding across marble floors, voices softened by money and expectation. The kind of place where everyone knew how to stand, how to smile, how to belong, or pretend they did. Ava Holloway adjusted her diamond bracelet as she moved through the room, heels clicking with confidence she'd practiced since childhood. She was 26, impeccably dressed, and carried the Holloway name like a passport that opened every door before she reached it. People noticed her. They always did. Ava smiled when it suited her. She accepted compliments without surprise. This world had raised her: private schools, charity luncheons, summer homes. She knew how to read a room and how to rule it. Tonight was no different. Her father's foundation was hosting the event, and every major player in real estate, finance, and city politics was present. This was her stage. Across the room, near the edge of the crowd, Renee Carter stood quietly, hands folded around a small black clutch. She wore a navy blue dress, elegant, simple, chosen carefully. Not to impress, just to fit. Renee had arrived alone. She hadn't grown up in rooms like this. She grew up on the South Side, in an apartment where the heat worked only when it wanted to and the landlord never answered calls. She learned early how to stay invisible when necessary, how to listen more than speak. Tonight, though, she hadn't come to disappear. She had come because she'd been invited. The email had been formal, polite, brief, a last-minute addition to the guest list tied to a property discussion scheduled for later in the week. Renee hadn't questioned it. She was used to being underestimated and used to letting time correct that mistake. She scanned the room, noting exits, faces, energy. Years in property management had taught her to read people the way others read contracts. The smiles that meant business. The ones that meant nothing. She took a slow breath. Chicago nights always smelled faintly of rain and steel, even indoors. Ava noticed Renee the way someone notices a stain on white fabric. Not immediately, but once she did, she couldn't stop. The dress was nice. Too nice for someone Ava didn't recognize. Renee didn't look lost exactly, but she didn't look connected either. No cluster of friends. No eager donor pulling her into conversation. Ava leaned toward her friend Madison and murmured, "Do you know her?" Madison glanced over, shrugged. "No idea." Ava's smile tightened. These events ran on order, on lists, on knowing who belonged where, and Ava prided herself on knowing everyone who mattered. She watched Renee for another moment. How she stood, calm, unbothered. How she didn't fidget or check her phone. That confidence without performance irritated Ava more than outright awkwardness ever could. Ava took a sip of champagne. "Probably someone's +1, she said. "Or staff." Renee felt the eyes before she saw the looks. She'd learned that too. The subtle pause when conversations shifted. The way a few glances lingered half a second too long. None of it was new. Spaces like this came with quiet tests. She didn't rush to pass them. She moved toward an empty spot near the tall windows overlooking Michigan Avenue. Traffic glowed below like a steady pulse. The city felt alive, honest, unfiltered. Nothing like the curated perfection behind her. She allowed herself a small smile. "You're here for a reason," she reminded herself. Ava made her move. She crossed the room with ease, stopping just close enough to be polite, close enough to assert. "Hi," Ava said, voice light. "I don't think we've met." Renee turned, met her gaze. "I don't believe we have." Ava's eyes flicked briefly to Renee's clutch, her shoes, her posture. "Can I ask who you're here with?" Ava asked. Renee's tone stayed even. "I'm here on my own." A beat. Ava smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, that's Interesting. These events are usually pretty structured. Renee nodded. They are. Silence stretched. Ava tilted her head. And your name? Renee Carter. Ava searched her memory. Nothing. Well, Ava said, her voice sweetening into something sharp. I just want to make sure everyone here is comfortable. Sometimes people wander in and it gets awkward later. Renee studied her for a moment, really looked at her. The youth, the certainty, the lack of curiosity. I understand, Renee said calmly. Ava's smile widened. Great, then you won't mind stepping outside while we sort this out. A few nearby conversations quieted. Renee felt the shift, but she didn't feel small. She felt tired. Before she could respond, Ava gestured subtly toward a security guard across the room. Can you help her find the exit? Ava said lightly. She doesn't seem to be on the list. If you've ever walked into a room and felt judged before you spoke, before anyone knew your story, pause here and ask yourself, what would you do in her place? Renee didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue. She turned toward the guard and said, I can leave. That's not a problem. The calm in her voice caused a ripple. It wasn't defeat. It wasn't fear. It was choice. Ava blinked, caught off guard by how easy it was. Renee took one step, then another. Behind her, Ava laughed softly. Not cruel. Casual. Certain. Unbelievable, Ava muttered. Some people really try it. Renee reached the edge of the room. She paused. Not because she needed permission, but because sometimes truth deserved timing. She turned back, her gaze steady, voice clear enough to carry, but not loud. Before I go, Renee said, you may want to let your father know I stopped by. Ava scoffed. Why would I do that? Renee held her eyes. Because the properties your foundation is renovating on the south side, she said gently, fall under my company. A murmur rolled through the room. Ava's smile faltered just slightly. Renee continued, calm as ever. And I prefer to meet the people I work with face to face. The silence thickened. Renee turned and walked toward the exit. Behind her, Ava stood frozen, because for the first time that night, something didn't make sense. And somewhere deep beneath the chandeliers and inherited confidence, a question began to form that Ava wasn't ready to ask. She didn't know it yet, but the woman she dismissed was holding the keys to everything they were about to lose. The hallway outside the ballroom felt colder than the room she left behind. Renee Carter walked past framed black and white photos of old Chicago, her heels steady against the carpet. She didn't rush. She didn't look back. The elevator doors waited at the end of the hall, reflecting a woman who looked calm, even though her chest felt tight. Not hurt, focused. She pressed the down button. Once. That was enough. Behind the ballroom doors, the noise slowly returned. Laughter crept back in. Music filled the spaces where silence had sat too long. People did what they always did when something uncomfortable happened. They moved on. Except Ava Holloway couldn't. She stood where Renee had left her, champagne glass frozen halfway to her lips. Around her, friends leaned in, whispering. Did she just say, no way? Is that even possible? Ava laughed too quickly. Relax. People say things all the time. That doesn't mean anything. But her heart was already beating faster. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through emails, guest lists, anything that might confirm she hadn't missed something obvious. Nothing. No Renee Carter. No company name she recognized. Still, a thin line of unease traced her spine. The elevator ride down felt longer than it was. Renee stared at the glowing numbers as they ticked lower. She thought about her mother, who used to say, you don't have to raise your voice when the truth is heavy enough. Outside, Michigan Avenue buzzed with life. Taxis honked. People laughed as they passed. The city didn't pause for embarrassment or pride. It just kept moving. Her phone vibrated. A text from her assistant, Malik. Malik, did the gala go okay? Renee typed, then erased. Typed again. Renee, it went exactly how it needed to. She slipped the phone back into her clutch and stepped into the night. Upstairs, Ava found her father near the stage, deep in conversation with a city councilman. Richard Holloway looked sharp in his tailored suit, gray at the temples, confident in the way men got when they'd spent decades being listened to. "Dad?" Ava said, touching his arm. "Quick question." He turned, smiling. "In a minute, sweetheart. It's important." That caught his attention. He excused himself and stepped aside. "What's wrong?" "There was a woman here," Ava said, lowering her voice. "She claimed she owns some of the Southside properties tied to the foundation." Richard frowned. "What woman?" "I don't know." "Renee Carter." The name hit him like a sudden drop. His smile vanished. "Where is she?" he asked. "She left," Ava said, confusion creeping in. "Dad, you don't actually know her, do you?" Richard didn't answer right away. He scanned the room, already moving toward the exit. "Ava," he said quietly, "how did that interaction go?" Ava hesitated. "Fine. I mean, she wasn't on the list." Richard stopped walking. "Did you ask her to leave?" The silence between them grew sharp. "Ava," he said again, slower now. "I didn't do anything wrong," she said, defensive. "If she's important, she should have made that clear." Richard closed his eyes for half a second. "She did," he said. "You just didn't listen." Renee sat in the back of a rideshare, watching the city blur past. Old brick buildings gave way to glass towers, then back again. Chicago was full of contrast. Always had been. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered. "This is Renee." "Ms. Carter," a man said, voice tight. "This is Richard Holloway." She said nothing. "I want to apologize," he continued, "for what happened tonight." Renee leaned her head back against the seat. "I'm listening." "My daughter was out of line," he said. "She didn't understand who you are." "That's rarely the real issue," Renee replied. Another pause. "I'd like to meet," Richard said. "As soon as possible." Renee looked out at a familiar block approaching. "We already have a meeting scheduled. Tuesday, 10 a.m. "Yes," he said quickly. "I remember." "Then we'll talk then," she said. "Good night, Mr. Holloway." She ended the call before he could respond. Tuesday came faster than expected. The Holloway Group's headquarters sat near the river, all glass and steel. Renee arrived early, as she always did. She wore a charcoal blazer, hair pulled back, expression unreadable. She was led into a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows. The city stretched out below them, sharp and real. Richard entered alone. He looked tired. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I didn't come as a favor," Renee replied. "I came as a stakeholder." He nodded. "Fair." They sat across from each other. Contracts lay untouched between them. "I wasn't aware your firm held controlling interest in those properties," Richard admitted. "That was an oversight." Renee met his eyes. "An expensive one." He exhaled. "My daughter isn't the issue," Renee said gently. "She's a symptom." Richard stiffened. "For years," Renee continued, "those buildings have been treated like numbers, not homes. My company bought them because no one else cared. We renovated. We stabilized. We kept rent fair." Richard looked away. "And now," she said, "your foundation wants to rebrand the neighborhood without understanding it." Silence filled the room. "What do you want?" he asked. Renee folded her hands. "Respect, transparency, and a seat at the table where decisions are actually made." Richard nodded slowly. "You'll have it." Ava waited outside the room, arms crossed, replaying the gala in her mind. Her confidence had cracks now. Small ones, but they were there. The door opened. Renee stepped out first. Their eyes met. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Renee said, "Good afternoon." Ava swallowed. "Aye." Renee walked past her. No lecture, no victory smile, just distance. Ava turned to her father, voice low. "Dad, who is she?" Richard looked at his daughter, seeing her clearly in a way he hadn't before. "She's someone we underestimated," he said. "And that mistake is about to cost us more than money." Ava's chest tightened, because for the first time in her life, She wasn't sure where she stood. And somewhere between pride and fear, a quiet truth settled in. The woman she tried to erase wasn't done yet. Not even close. After Tuesday, life was supposed to return to normal. Didn't. Ava Holloway sat in traffic on Lakeshore Drive, hands tight on the steering wheel, watching the skyline stretch ahead of her. She'd driven this road 1,000 times. Usually it calmed her. Today it felt narrow, loud, too honest. Her father hadn't said much since the meeting. That scared her more than if he had yelled. At breakfast the next morning, he read the paper in silence. No small talk. No usual updates about deals or donors. When Ava mentioned the gala, he didn't look up. "Drop it," he said. So she tried. She went to the gym, met friends for lunch in River North, smiled when people asked about the foundation. But Renee Carter's face kept appearing in her mind, calm, steady, unimpressed. Not angry. That was the worst part. Ava had been taught how to handle anger, tears, even jealousy. She didn't know what to do with indifference. Across the city, Renee sat at her kitchen table with a mug of coffee gone cold. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and distant sirens outside. She liked mornings like this. Still, honest. Her laptop was open, documents spread across the screen. Property maps, emails, numbers that told a story most people never bothered to read. Her phone buzzed. Malik again. Malik. Holloway Group just sent over revised terms. Renee sighed. She'd expected that. Renee will review. No rush. She closed the laptop and leaned back, eyes drifting to the window. The neighborhood below was waking up. Kids waiting for the bus. A corner store opening its gate. Life continuing no matter who controlled the paperwork. This was why she did what she did. Not galas. Not power plays. People. Still, she couldn't deny the weight of what had happened. She'd walked into that ballroom knowing she didn't look like them, knowing she might be questioned. What she hadn't expected was how quickly the room chose sides. She pushed the thought away. She'd learned a long time ago that dwelling didn't move anything forward. At Holloway headquarters, tension sat just beneath the surface. Executives spoke carefully in meetings. Emails doubled in length but said less. Everyone knew something had shifted, even if no one named it. Ava watched from the edges. She wasn't invited into the Tuesday meeting, or the follow-ups. That had never happened before. Finally, she cornered her father in his office. "Why am I being shut out?" she asked. Richard looked up slowly. "Because this isn't about you. It became about me the moment you let her walk out." Ava shot back. Richard stood, walked to the window. "No. It became about you the moment you assumed she didn't belong." Ava's voice dropped. "I was protecting the event." "You were protecting your comfort," he said. That landed harder than she expected. "She embarrassed me," Ava said quietly. Richard turned. "You embarrassed yourself." The words hung there. "She's dangerous," Ava added, reaching. "She's trying to leverage." "She's correcting a mistake," he interrupted. "One we made." Ava crossed her arms. "So what, we just let her dictate terms?" "No," Richard said. "We listen." Ava shook her head. "That's not how this works." "Maybe that's why it's breaking," he replied. Renee avoided downtown for the rest of the week. She met with tenants, walked through buildings under renovation, listened to complaints about leaky pipes and rising grocery prices. This was the work that grounded her. Still, she felt the pressure building. Emails from lawyers, calls from partners. Everyone wanted to know how far she planned to push. Renee didn't answer right away. She believed in timing. One afternoon, she stood in an empty apartment unit, sunlight spilling across bare floors. Fresh paint still smelled sharp in the air. The space used to be unlivable. Now it waited for a family. She smiled softly. This was her leverage. Not money, not status. Impact. Her phone rang again. This time she answered. "Ms. Carter," Ava's voice said. Tight, controlled. Renee closed her eyes for a brief moment. "Yes. I wanted to clear the air," Ava said. "What happened at the gala?" It was a misunderstanding. Renee said nothing. Ava continued, faster now. I didn't have all the information. If I did, I would have handled it differently. That's possible, Renee replied. Another pause. I'd like to meet, Ava said. Just us. Renee considered it. For what purpose? She asked. To move forward, Ava said. Without tension. Renee looked around the empty apartment, imagining who would soon call it home. Friday, she said. My office. Noon. Thank you, Ava said, relief leaking through. Renee ended the call and stared at the wall longer than necessary. She wasn't sure why she'd agreed, but something told her this wasn't finished. Not yet. Friday came with rain. Chicago streets darkened, reflections pooling along the sidewalks. Ava arrived early, sitting in her car, watching the building across the street. It wasn't impressive. No glass tower, no valet, just brick. Solid, quiet. She took a breath and stepped out. Renee's office was simple. Clean lines, warm wood, photos on the walls, neighborhoods, not awards. Renee greeted her politely. No warmth, no edge. They sat across from each other. I want you to understand, Ava began. I'm not a bad person. Renee folded her hands. I didn't say you were. But you think I'm entitled, Ava said. Renee met her eyes. I think you've never had to question your place in a room. Ava swallowed. That doesn't make you evil, Renee added. It makes you untested. Silence filled the space. Ava looked down. I don't like feeling wrong. Most people don't, Renee said. So what now? Ava asked. Renee leaned back. Now you decide whether you're willing to learn, or if you'd rather stay comfortable. Ava looked up, something fragile breaking through her confidence. And if I choose wrong? Renee stood, walked to the window. Rain streaked the glass. Then this stays professional, she said. And distant. Ava nodded slowly. As she left the office, the rain soaked through her coat. She didn't rush to the car. For the first time, she wondered, what if this wasn't about saving face? What if it was about changing? And inside her office, Renee watched the street below, aware of a truth she couldn't ignore anymore. The real conflict wasn't business. It was personal. And the next move would decide everything. The first site visit was supposed to be simple. An hour, maybe 2. Walk the properties. Review progress. Leave emotions out of it. That plan lasted less than 5 minutes. Renee stood near the curb on the south side, hard hat in hand, clipboard tucked under her arm. The air smelled like wet pavement and fresh lumber. Construction noise echoed down the block. Hammers, voices, the steady grind of work getting done. A black SUV pulled up. Ava stepped out, dressed down for once. No heels, no sharp edges. Just boots, jeans, and a jacket that looked new enough to still feel stiff. She hesitated when she saw Renee. Morning, Ava said. Morning, Renee replied. They walked side by side without touching, without warmth, without hostility, just awareness. Malik joined them, explaining timelines and budgets. Contractors nodded as they passed. People waved at Renee, called her by name, thanked her. Ava noticed. She noticed how Renee listened, how she stopped to ask questions, how people didn't rush their answers. This wasn't performance. This was trust. Inside one of the renovated buildings, the halls smelled like paint and sawdust. Light poured through new windows. Felt hopeful. Real. This unit was unlivable 2 years ago, Malik said. Mold. Broken heat. Ava ran her fingers along the doorframe. And now families want to stay, Renee said. That matters. Ava nodded slowly. It does. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Ava spoke. You don't like me. Renee didn't answer right away. I don't know you, she said finally. That's worse, Ava replied. Renee looked at her. Is it? Ava sighed. I've spent my whole life being liked, or at least tolerated. And? Renee asked. And now I don't know where I stand. Renee considered her words. You stand where you choose to. They moved on. The second building had an issue. A pipe burst overnight. Water pooled across the floor. Contractors scrambled. Tenants waited outside, worried. Renee took control immediately. Calls made. Plans adjusted. Temporary housing arranged. Ava watched, unsure where to step in. Finally, she asked, "What can I do?" Renee looked surprised. "You want to help?" "Yes," Ava said quickly. "I do." Renee handed her a phone. "Call the hotel down the street. Ask about short-term rooms." Ava didn't argue. She made the call. For the next hour, they worked side by side. No titles. No history. Just problem-solving. At one point, Ava glanced at Renee and said, "You're good at this." Renee shrugged. "I had to be." By the time they finished, it was late afternoon. Rain clouds cleared. Sunlight broke through, soft and unexpected. They stood outside, quiet. "I misjudged you," Ava said. Renee met her gaze. "That's true." Ava flinched, then nodded. "I want to do better." Renee studied her face, not searching for apology, searching for honesty. "We'll see," she said. As Ava drove away, something settled in her chest. Not comfort, not fear, responsibility. And Renee watched her go, knowing one thing for certain. Working together was changing them both. But the closer they got, the harder the truth would hit. Because forced proximity didn't soften secrets. It exposed them. And the next one was already waiting. The email arrived at midnight. Renee was still awake, sitting at her desk, reviewing numbers she already knew by heart. The subject line was plain, almost polite. Re-ownership records urgent. She opened it. By the third line, her shoulders tightened. By the fifth, she stopped breathing. The attachment was a scanned document, old, yellowed around the edges. Property transfer dated more than a decade ago. Her company's name was there, clear as day. And beneath it, another name, Holloway Holdings. Partial interest. Quiet. Buried. Renee leaned back in her chair. So that was it. They hadn't just overlooked her. They had circled her work for years. Let her build. Let her repair what they had ignored. And now, when the value was clear, they were stepping forward. Her phone buzzed. Malik again. "Malik, we need to talk. Now." Ava sat in her apartment, lights off, laptop glowing in the dark. She hadn't slept much since the site visit. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the tenants standing in the rain. Renee's calm voice, her own hesitation. She clicked through old files her father had given her access to years ago but never expected her to read closely. She read them now. Transfers. Shell companies. Strategic delays. Her chest tightened. This wasn't charity. This was positioning. Her phone rang. Renee's name flashed on the screen. Ava answered immediately. "I didn't know," she said. Renee's voice was steady, but colder than before. "Didn't know what?" "That my father's company had partial interest in those properties," Ava said. "I swear." Renee believed her. That was the problem. "Then you should come downtown," Renee said. "Now." They met in a quiet diner near the river. Vinyl booths. Coffee that tasted burnt but honest. A place where deals weren't expected to happen. Renee slid the document across the table. Ava read it slowly. Her hands shook. "This can't be right," she whispered. "It is," Renee said. "And it explains a lot." Ava looked up. "He never said." "He wouldn't," Renee replied. "Because this only works if no one asks questions." Silence stretched between them. A waitress refilled their cups without comment. Ava's voice cracked. "I thought we were helping." "You were," Renee said. "Just not for the reasons you believed." Ava pushed the paper back. "What are you going to do?" Renee stared out the window. The river moved slow and heavy, carrying reflections of the city above it. "I built my company to protect people who didn't have power," she said. "Not to become a line item in someone else's strategy." Ava swallowed. "My father won't give this up." "I know," Renee said. Ava's eyes filled. "Then he'll fight you." Renee nodded. "Yes." "And if he loses?" Ava asked. Renee met her gaze. Then everything changes. Richard Holloway didn't sleep that night either. He stood in his office long after the lights in the building went dark, staring at the city that had made him rich. He told himself he'd done nothing wrong. Everything was legal, strategic, necessary. That had always been enough. Until now. His phone buzzed. A message from Ava. "We need to talk. About Renee Carter. About everything." He didn't reply. He already knew what she'd seen. And he knew what it meant. Renee returned home just before dawn. She sat on the edge of her bed, heels still on, staring at the wall. She thought about her mother again. About long nights balancing bills. About promises made to herself when she finally had control. She wasn't angry. She was resolved. Her phone lit up with a new message. "Unknown number. If you push this, you'll lose more than you think." Renee deleted it without responding. She stood, walked to the window, and watched the sun rise over the city. Chicago didn't look gentle in the morning light. It looked honest. And as the day began, Renee knew one thing for certain. This was no longer about respect. It was about survival. And the next move would break something that could never be put back together. The first headline appeared before sunrise. Renee saw it while standing in line at a coffee shop on 63rd Street, the kind of place that still used paper cups and knew customers by name. Her phone buzzed. Once. Then again. She glanced down. Real estate dispute brews between local developer and Holloway Group. She didn't open it yet. She paid for her coffee, thanked the cashier, and stepped back outside. The air was sharp and cool. Chicago mornings always felt honest. No glamour. No pretending. She opened the article. By the second paragraph, her jaw tightened. They called her a small independent investor. They described the buildings as underutilized assets. They framed Holloway Holdings as a visionary force being slowed down by resistance. Her name was there. Her work wasn't. She scrolled. Anonymous sources. Carefully chosen words. Enough truth to sound real. Enough spin to change the story. Renee closed the article. This was the move she'd been waiting for. Across the city, Ava woke to her phone lighting up non-stop. Texts, emails, missed calls. She sat up in bed, heart pounding, and opened the first message. From Madison. "Madison, is this about your dad?" The article's everywhere. Ava clicked the link. Her stomach dropped. She read it once. Then again. This wasn't just business pressure. This was character assassination wrapped in polite language. She jumped out of bed and drove straight downtown, traffic blurring past her as her thoughts raced. By the time she reached Holloway headquarters, the building buzzed with energy that felt sharp, almost electric. Assistants whispered. Executives moved fast, eyes avoiding hers. Her father's office door was closed. She knocked. "Dad," she called. "Open the door." No answer. She knocked again, harder. The door finally opened. Richard Holloway looked older than she'd ever seen him. His tie was loose. His eyes were tired but focused. "You saw it," he said. "Yes," Ava replied. "And I know where it came from." Richard stepped aside. "Come in." She walked past him, anger rising. "This is wrong." He closed the door. "This is necessary." "For what?" Ava demanded. "To win. To survive," he snapped. Ava froze. "Survive what?" Richard turned away. "This company. This foundation. Everything I built." "At whose expense?" Ava asked. He faced her. "That's how the world works." Ava shook her head. "That's how you made it work." Silence fell between them. "She trusted us," Ava said quietly. Richard scoffed. "She positioned herself. She renovated those buildings when no one else would." Ava shot back. "She kept people housed. And now she wants control," Richard said. "Over areas we need to expand." Ava stared at him. "You're afraid of her." His jaw tightened. "I'm realistic," he said. "No," Ava replied. "You're threatened." Renee's phone rang all morning. Lawyers, partners, reporters. She answered none of them. Instead, she drove. South Side. West Side. Properties she knew by heart. She walked through hallways she'd once paid to repair herself. Tenants stopped her, worried. "Are they selling the building?" one woman asked. "Is our rent going up?" another whispered. Renee smiled where she could, reassured where possible. But the truth sat heavy in her chest. This wasn't just about ownership anymore. This was about fear. Fear spreads faster than facts. By noon, another article dropped. This one harsher. She finally called Malik. "They're pushing hard," he said. "They're trying to box you in." "I know," Renee replied. "You could settle," Malik offered carefully. "Take the payout." Renee stopped walking, looked up at a building she'd fought to save from demolition years ago. "No," she said. Malik exhaled. "Then this gets ugly." "It already is," she replied. Ava left her father's office shaken. She didn't go back to her apartment. She didn't call friends. She drove. She didn't know where she was going until she was already there. Parked across the street from Renee's office. She sat in the car for a long moment. Then she got out. Renee didn't expect her. She looked up from her desk as Ava entered, eyes guarded. "I didn't know they'd go public," Ava said immediately. "I swear." Renee studied her face. "I believe you." That surprised Ava. "You do?" "Yes," Renee replied. "But belief doesn't stop damage." Ava nodded. "I confronted him." "And?" Renee asked. "He won't stop," Ava said. "He thinks this is war." Renee leaned back. "It is." Ava's voice broke. "I don't want to be on his side anymore." Renee's expression softened, but only slightly. "Then don't be." "It's not that simple," Ava whispered. "He's my father." Renee stood, walked toward the window. The city moved below them, unaware. "I know," she said. "And that's what makes this hurt." Ava wiped her eyes. "What are you going to do?" Renee turned. "I'm going to tell the truth." "That could destroy him," Ava said. "It could," Renee agreed. "It could also save people." Ava nodded slowly. "Then let me help." Renee searched her face. "Helping means choosing." Ava took a breath. "I'm choosing." The next blow came faster than anyone expected. That evening, Renee's funding partner pulled out. Then another. Emails came filled with polite language and quiet fear. "We can't afford the risk. The optics are complicated. We'll revisit later." Later meant never. Renee sat alone in her office long after dark. Lights off. City glowing through the windows. The hum of traffic below felt distant. Her phone buzzed. A message from Malik. "They're filing tomorrow. Legal injunction. Freezing assets." Renee closed her eyes. This was it. The breaking point she'd prepared for but never wanted. She thought about walking away. About taking what she could salvage and letting the rest burn. She thought about the tenants. The families. The trust they'd placed in her. She stood. Picked up her coat. The court filing hit the next morning. Temporary injunction. Asset review. Control in question. News vans lined the street outside her office. Inside Holloway headquarters, celebration was muted but real. A sense of relief pulsed through the building. Richard stood at the window watching the city. "We stabilized it," one executive said. "She won't be able to move." Richard nodded. "Good." But the victory didn't feel clean. Ava stood near the door, pale. "You froze her accounts," she said. "Yes," Richard replied. "You're hurting people," Ava said. "Not just her." "She'll recover," he said. "They always do." Ava's voice rose. "Not everyone has what you have." Richard turned sharply. "You're being emotional." "No," Ava said. "I'm being honest." Silence fell. "If you testify," Richard said slowly, "you'll burn every bridge you have." Ava met his gaze. "Then maybe those bridges deserve to burn." Renee sat in her car outside the courthouse, hands resting on the steering wheel. She'd just come from the emergency hearing. Lawyers spoke. Papers shuffled. Decisions postponed. Time bought, not safety. Her phone rang. "Ava." "I'm in," Ava said. "All the way." Renee closed her eyes. Are you sure? No, Ava replied. But I'm done pretending. Renee exhaled. Then be careful. I know, Ava said. So do you. They hung up. Renee looked up at the courthouse steps, cold stone worn by history. She stepped out of the car. As she climbed the stairs, cameras flashed. Voices called her name. She didn't answer. Inside, the fight was just beginning. And somewhere across the city, Richard Holloway felt something he hadn't felt in decades. Fear. Because this time, power wasn't enough. And the cost of winning might be losing everything that ever mattered. The next chapter wouldn't be about strategy. It would be about sacrifice. And someone wasn't going to walk away whole. The city slowed after the injunction. Not everywhere. Not for everyone. But for Renee Carter, time began to feel heavier. Each hour carried weight. Each decision pressed deeper than the last. She woke before dawn most mornings, not because she had to, but because sleep no longer came easily. When it did, it brought fragments. Hallways full of voices, doors closing, faces she couldn't quite reach. She'd sit at her kitchen table, hands wrapped around coffee she barely tasted, listening to the city wake up. Sirens in the distance. A train rattling somewhere west. Life continuing even when hers felt paused. Her company was still standing, technically, but it was wounded. Frozen accounts meant delayed repairs. Delayed repairs meant anxious tenants. And anxiety had a way of spreading faster than truth. She hated that part the most. Ava Holloway's world was unraveling in quieter ways. She hadn't gone back to her apartment. She stayed with a friend on the north side, sleeping on a couch that smelled like detergent and unfamiliar perfume. Her phone buzzed constantly. Friends asking questions, donors requesting reassurance, messages she didn't know how to answer. Her father hadn't called. That hurt more than she expected. Instead, his lawyer called. Then another executive. Then someone from the foundation board. They all said the same thing, just with different words. Think carefully. This doesn't have to get messy. Family comes first. Ava stared at the ceiling one night, phone pressed to her chest, wondering when family had started meaning silence. Renee met with her legal team in a small conference room that felt too tight for the conversation it held. The injunction buys them leverage, her attorney said. They're hoping you'll settle. I won't, Renee replied. He nodded. Then we need testimony, paper trails, and witnesses willing to speak. Renee leaned back. You'll have them. Outside, the sky darkened. Storm clouds rolled in, low and heavy. Be prepared, the attorney added. This won't just expose their business. It'll expose people. Renee knew. That was the cost. The first crack came from an unexpected place. An older property manager named Luis showed up at Renee's office without an appointment. He'd worked for Holloway Holdings years ago. Left quietly. Avoided attention. I saw the articles, he said, eyes tired. What they're doing to you. It's not new. Renee listened as he spoke. About shell companies. About pressure to delay repairs until buyouts made sense. About buildings intentionally left to rot. I kept quiet, he admitted. I needed the job. Renee didn't judge him. Would you be willing to say this under oath? She asked. Luis hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, I would. One voice became two, then three. Pattern began to form. Ava watched it unfold from the sidelines. Each new name that surfaced tightened the knot in her chest. These weren't villains. They were people who'd made small choices over long periods of time. People like her. She visited her father's office late one evening. The building was nearly empty, lights dimmed, echoing with old success. Richard Holloway stood alone, looking out over the river. You're back, he said without turning. I never really left, Ava replied. He sighed. You don't understand what you're doing. I understand more than I ever have, she said. He faced her. This company feeds thousands of families and displaces thousands more, Ava said. That's not fair, he snapped. No, she agreed. But it's true. Silence fell. I raised you better than this, Richard said quietly. Ava's voice shook. You raised me to believe we were good. That landed. Richard looked away. The hearing date was set. News vans returned. Protesters gathered outside the courthouse. Tenants held signs asking for stability, not sides. Renee arrived early, dressed simply. No statement outfit. No armor. Just herself. Ava arrived separately. They didn't sit together. They didn't acknowledge each other. Not yet. Inside, the courtroom felt colder than the weather outside. Wood benches. High ceilings. A judge who looked tired but attentive. Testimony began. Luis spoke first. Then others. Each story added weight. Not drama. Just fact. Renee listened. Hands folded. Eyes steady. Then it was Ava's turn. A murmur rippled through the room as she stood. Richard stiffened. Ava took the oath. Her voice was clear. She spoke about documents she'd seen. Conversations she remembered. Assumptions she'd never questioned. I believed our foundation was helping communities, she said. I now understand it also helped hide harm. Her father closed his eyes. When she finished, the room felt different. Charged. Quiet. Renee didn't look at her. Not yet. The hearing ended without a decision. More time. More review. Outside, cameras crowded. Questions flew. Renee stepped past them. Ava followed. They reached the sidewalk together, breath visible in the cold air. I didn't do it for you, Ava said quietly. I know, Renee replied. They stood there, the city rushing around them. I don't know what happens next, Ava added. Neither do I, Renee said. But you did the right thing. Ava nodded, tears threatening. They parted ways again. Still not finished. The backlash came fast. Donors pulled out of the Holloway Foundation. Board members resigned. Sponsors demanded answers. Richard Holloway retreated. He stopped answering calls. Stopped attending meetings. His empire, once loud and proud, grew quiet. At home, he sat alone in his study, surrounded by awards that felt like relics. He replayed moments he'd dismissed, decisions he'd justified. He thought about his daughter, the way she'd looked at him in court. Not angry, disappointed. That hurt most. Renee faced her own losses. 2 more partners withdrew. Cash flow tightened. Projects paused. She met with tenants again. Explained delays honestly. Some understood. Some didn't. She accepted that. Late one night, Malik found her sitting on the office floor, back against the wall. You don't have to do this alone, he said. She smiled tiredly. I know. Do you ever wish you'd walked away? He asked. She thought about it. No, she said. I wish it didn't cost so much. But I don't wish I'd stayed quiet. The judge's ruling came on a gray Thursday morning. Partial lift of the injunction. Temporary control returned to Renee's firm pending full trial. Oversight mandated. It wasn't victory, but it was breath. Renee stood in her office, reading the decision twice. Her phone rang. Ava. They didn't destroy you, Ava said. Not yet, Renee replied. There was a pause. I don't know what happens with my father, Ava said. Or with me. Renee looked out the window at the city she loved. You'll figure it out. I hope so, Ava whispered. They hung up. That night, Richard Holloway visited his daughter for the first time since the hearing. She opened the door slowly. He looked smaller. I'm proud of you, he said. She didn't answer right away. I don't know who I am without the company, he added. Ava met his eyes. Then maybe this is your chance to find out. He nodded, tears forming. Across town, Renee locked her office and stepped into the street. The air smelled like rain and concrete. She felt tired, but lighter. The fight wasn't over, but something had shifted. Power had been questioned. Silence had been broken. And as she walked toward her car, she knew the final chapter wouldn't be decided in court. It would be decided in what they chose to rebuild, together or apart. And the choice was coming. Spring came slowly to Chicago that year. Not all at once. Not with a sudden burst of warmth or clear skies. It came in pieces. One mild afternoon, one tree blooming early, One morning when the air felt lighter than it had the day before. For Renee Carter, spring arrived the morning she unlocked her office and realized she could breathe again. The ruling had settled more than numbers. It had shifted power. The court hadn't crowned a winner, but it had drawn a line, one that could no longer be crossed quietly. Her company still stood, bruised, watched, changed, but standing. She set her bag down, rolled up her sleeves, and got back to work. The first order of business wasn't contracts. It was people. Renee spent the next weeks walking her properties again. Not with lawyers or cameras. Just her. Sometimes Malik. Sometimes no one. She listened. Tenants talked about fear. About sleepless nights. About rumors they didn't know how to fight. Renee answered every question honestly. When she didn't have answers, she said so. Trust didn't come from perfection. It came from presence. Slowly, the tension eased. Repairs resumed. Contractors returned. Laughter came back to hallways that had felt too quiet. Life moved forward. Ava Holloway moved too, but in a direction she'd never planned. She stepped away from the foundation. It wasn't dramatic. No press release. No speech. She simply resigned. The first week felt like free fall. She woke up unsure where to go, what to do, who she was without a title. Friends stopped calling as often. Invitations dried up. Silence filled the space where noise used to live. And for the first time, Ava sat with herself. She volunteered at a legal aid clinic on the west side, helping tenants understand their rights. At first, she felt useless, out of place. Then she learned. She listened. She began to understand what Renee had always known. Systems weren't abstract. They touched real lives. One afternoon, as she helped an elderly woman fill out paperwork, Ava felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Purpose. Richard Holloway sold his controlling interest quietly. The news broke weeks later, framed as retirement. A strategic exit. A shift in priorities. Only a few people knew the truth. He moved out of his downtown condo and into a smaller place near the lake. He walked more, spoke less. One evening, he sat alone on a bench watching the water move. Ava joined him. They didn't talk at first. "I spent my whole life building something," he said eventually. "I thought that made me strong." Ava nodded. "It did." "And losing it?" he asked. She thought, "That's teaching you who you are without it." He looked at her, eyes tired but clearer than before. "You're stronger than I ever was." She shook her head. "I just had better teachers." Renee didn't expect the invitation. Came by email. Simple. Direct. Community Housing Summit Panel Discussion. She hesitated before accepting. Public attention still made her uneasy. But Malik convinced her. "They need to hear from you," he said. "Not just about the fight. About what comes after." The event was held in a community center on the south side. Folding chairs. Coffee in large metal urns. Kids running through hallways. Felt right. Renee spoke plainly. About mistakes. About power. About why housing wasn't just business. She didn't mention the Gala. She didn't mention humiliation. She talked about accountability. When the panel ended, applause filled the room. Not loud. Not flashy. Earnest. As she stepped off the stage, she saw Ava standing near the back. Not dressed up. No entourage. Just there. They met near the exit. "I didn't know you'd be here," Renee said. "I wasn't sure you'd want me," Ava replied. Renee studied her face. The uncertainty. The humility. "People can show up in different ways," Renee said. "You're learning that." Ava smiled. "Because you taught me." They stood side by side, watching families gather coats, hearing laughter echo off painted walls. For the first time, they weren't opposite each other. They were simply present. Summer arrived with heat and noise and long evenings. Renee's company stabilized. New partners came in, smaller, quieter ones who shared her values. Growth slowed, but depth increased. She didn't mind. One afternoon, she received a letter in the mail. Handwritten. It was from a tenant who'd lived in one of her buildings for 10 years. "Thank you for staying," it read. "When it got hard." Renee folded the letter carefully and placed it in her desk drawer. Some victories weren't meant to be shared. Ava enrolled in night classes, urban policy, ethics, housing law. She sat in rooms where no one knew her last name, where she was just another student with questions. Felt strange. Felt good. One night after class, she walked past the river and thought about the gala, the lights, the laughter, the moment she thought power meant control. She knew better now. Power meant responsibility. And responsibility didn't come with applause. The lawsuit never went to full trial. Mediation followed. Then settlement. Holloway Holdings withdrew completely from the contested properties. Public apologies were issued. Funds were redirected to community oversight programs. It wasn't justice in a clean bow, but it was progress. When Renee signed the final agreement, she didn't smile. She exhaled. That was enough. Months later, fall returned to the city. Leaves turned. Air cooled. Life shifted again. Renee hosted a small open house at one of the renovated buildings. Tenants brought food. Kids ran around with balloons. No press. No speeches. Just community. Ava attended quietly. She helped set up chairs. Picked up trash. Spoke to people who didn't know her history. Renee watched her from across the courtyard. Not with judgment. With recognition. Later, as the sun dipped low, they stood together near the fence. "You didn't have to come," Renee said. "I wanted to," Ava replied. "This feels real." Renee nodded. "It is." They stood in comfortable silence. "I don't know what my future looks like," Ava said. "None of us do," Renee replied. "That's not a weakness." Ava smiled softly. "I used to think I had to earn my place in every room. And now?" Renee asked. "Now I know I have to listen before I speak." Renee looked at her, eyes warm. That's how change starts. As the evening wound down, Renee walked through the building one last time. Lights glowed in windows. Music drifted from an apartment upstairs. She paused in the hallway, touching the wall lightly. This was what she'd fought for. Not recognition. Not revenge. Stability. Outside, Ava waited by her car. "I'm glad you stayed," Ava said. "So am I," Renee replied. They exchanged a quiet look, no tension, no debt. Just understanding. As Renee drove home, the city lights stretched out before her. Familiar. Earned. She knew there would be more battles. More moments where standing firm would cost her something. But she also knew this. She no longer stood alone. And as the road curved ahead, one thought stayed with her, steady and sure. The future wasn't about who owned the room. It was about who chose to rebuild it. And the story didn't end here. It never really did. It simply opened into something better. Chicago changed again as winter edged closer. Not with drama. Not with headlines. It changed in quieter ways. Gray mornings, earlier sunsets, the kind of cold that made people pull their coats tighter and walk faster without realizing why. For Renee Carter, the cold came from somewhere deeper. Victory had brought relief, stability, a sense of ground under her feet again. But it also brought something else. Expectation. The calls started before Thanksgiving. Community groups wanted her on boards. Universities invited her to speak. Journalists asked for follow-ups, angles, reflections. How did it feel to stand up to a billionaire? What advice would you give to other women of color? Do you see yourself as a symbol? Renee answered politely at first, then carefully, then less often, because she didn't feel like a symbol. She felt tired. At night, she sat alone in her condo, scrolling through emails she didn't respond to. Malik noticed the change. "You okay?" he asked one evening as they ate takeout on the couch. "I think so," she said, then paused. "I just didn't expect this part." "This part?" he asked. "Being visible," she said. "Everyone wants something now." Malik nodded. "That's the cost of being right in public." Renee leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "I didn't do this to be seen." "I know," he said gently. "That's why they're looking." Ava Holloway felt the shift too, but hers came with distance. People who once rushed to stand beside her now hesitated. Conversations cooled when she entered rooms. Old friends treated her like a reminder they didn't want to face. She didn't blame them. She had been one of them once. Still, the loneliness surprised her. One evening, she stayed late at the clinic, helping a young mother fight an eviction notice. When the caseworker thanked her, Ava felt a small warmth spread through her chest. This mattered, even when no one clapped. Renee's first real doubt came in December. A mid-sized investor pulled out unexpectedly. No warning, no explanation. Then another delayed a decision. Rumors followed. She's too political, too risky, too visible. Renee met with her team, sitting at the long conference table she'd fought to keep. "We're stable," she said, "but we need to be careful." Her CFO hesitated. "Some partners are nervous about your profile." Renee felt something tighten in her chest. "You mean my values?" The room went quiet. "We don't need to shrink," she said finally. "We need to be clear." But clarity didn't calm fear. After the meeting, Renee stayed behind alone, looking out at the city through glass that reflected her own face back at her. Strong, tired, questioning. The holidays arrived with forced cheer. Renee hosted fewer people this year. Smaller dinners, softer lights. She didn't go to any galas. Didn't want to. Instead, she spent Christmas Eve delivering meals with a neighborhood group. No cameras, no speeches, just work. As she handed a bag to an elderly man who thanked her twice, she felt steadier. This was where she belonged. Ava spent Christmas with her father. Just the two of them. No staff, no formalities. They cooked together, awkward but trying. Richard burned the ham slightly. Ava laughed, then covered her mouth, surprised by how easy it felt. Later, they sat by the window watching snowfall. "I'm proud of you," he said quietly.